Hello, crafty friends. Welcome. I'm going to be creating 3 cards in today's video using a brand new stamp and die set from Simon Hurley. It's actually a Simon Hurley and Spellbinders collaboration, and I'm going to be playing with this particular stamp set. It is called Succulents. This is a really large stamp set, and you get a lot of beautiful cactus images. And you can buy the coordinating dies as a separate purchase if you'd like. Let's open this up and take a look at this. You get a die for each of the images and a lot of wonderful sentiments. And the die set also comes with a sentiment that says hugs. It also comes with the solid image for each plant, so you can just stamp it out if you want, and you don't have to do any coloring except for the pot. But here are all of the dies. And then, of course, the little hugs sentiment die. So I'm going to start out by stamping out 2 of the plants. And I'm going to stamp them out with some Copic-friendly ink so that I can color in the pot. But for the plant part, I'm going to use some Simon Hurley inks. I'll stamp it out with this black ink several times. I'm only going to show one stamping, but I stamped it out about 3 times. Okay, now I can remove the stamp from the door of the Mini Misty and then pull out the solid image and just place this on top. And then I'll pick it up with the door of the Misty. The first ink I'm using is kind of a pinky purple color. It's called Sidewalk Chalk. And I just want to stamp out the top of these plants. And I have to do this a few times just to build up the color. And it is a new stamp, so it's not conditioned yet. So let's just stamp the tips of these again. And that's the great thing about using your Misty. You can keep stamping in the exact same place. Okay, I think that looks really cute. And next we're going to use some green ink on the rest of the cactus. And this one is called Overzealous. I'm just going to stamp up the whole image and then bring in a microfiber cloth and remove the ink from the tips of this cactus. Okay, now we can close the door of the Misty. And I really love how this one turned out. I'm not going to add any more ink. I'm just going to, try to get a little more ink off of the image. And I like those white spaces that didn't get stamped perfectly. They look like highlights to me. I stamped another plant, and this time I'm going in with some yellow Over the Moon ink. And again, I just want to stamp out the tips of the plant with this ink. And that wasn't quite dark enough, so I'm going to add a little more ink to this stamp. I'm going to bring in the microfiber cloth and just remove some of the ink because I just want the very tips of this plant colored in with yellow. And I'll add some green next. This one is called Later Gator, and I'll go over the whole image and then just wipe away the tips. Okay, so I am going to ink this up again. I just want the plant to be a little darker. And then I'm actually going to stamp it up one more time. This cardstock that I'm using is Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. Okay, let me give you a close-up look at these cute cacti. So I'm going to use some Copic markers to color in the pots. And I have an E07 for my darkest color. And then I'll bring in an E04, which is a little bit lighter. These two are hard to blend, but I think they look fabulous together. I'm going to do a little bit of flicking at the edge of this pot. This just helps it to look more blended. There we go. Okay, so let's color in the second pot. I'm bringing in an RV55 for the tops of the cacti. I'll bring that back for the little dots on the pot, but I want the pot to be white. So I'm just going to do some gray highlights, or gray shadows, I should say, with my neutral grays. My neutral grays are my favorite. I have the warm grays and the cool grays, but I reach for my neutral grays the most, I find. So a very simple pot, and then I'll bring in the pink for the little dots at the top. Okay, now I can use the coordinating dies, and I'll tape these down and run them through my Platinum 6 machine. And here they are all cut out. Aren't those adorable? Okay, so I wanted to stamp out one more image. I loved this succulent. And so I'm going to ink this up with more extreme black ink, which is a Copic-friendly ink. And I did stamp that out more than once. Then I'm going to color this in with some Copic markers. So the tips of this particular plant are kind of a pinky purple. So I'll start with the tips of each petal. My lightest pink is an R83. And this stamp set is fun because if you prefer to color in your images, you can of course do that like I'm doing here. And I really love how large this particular cactus is. So I'm just doing some very quick coloring. It seems like it's been a while since I've used my Copic markers, so I'm having a lot of fun using these. And I find that a lot of them are dried out. I need to get some refills for some of my markers. Okay, next I'm going to come in with a green marker. This is a YG61. And I'm just going right over the pink, or at least the edge of the pink. And this looks pretty as it is, but I'm going to come in with a darker green and a darker pink to add some depth to the coloring. Okay, let's start with the pink first. I'm just adding a little bit to the tips. And I'm not completely covering in my lightest pink. But you can see how much better the image looks once I start adding these deeper colors. This really makes the image pop. Next, I'm going to bring in a darker green, which is a YG63. And for this, I'm just going into the little nooks and crannies where the petals are attached to the plant. So just the base of the petals here and there. So there are a few other stamps in this release, and I'll make sure that I link those in the description box if you want to check those out. But again, this one's just called Succulents. And I'm not sure that I have any cactus images in my collection, so this was a really fun one to play with. So here are all 3 images ready to put on cards. I'm going to start with the large succulent first. And I'm using a piece of rainforest cardstock, and I'm going to stamp out a background for my main image, just using the Succulents Stamp Set again. And this is some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which stamps out very dark and crisp. You don't really need a MISTI or a stamping tool with this ink. However, I didn't want to use it with my Copics because it will smear. Once this background panel is done, I'm going to go ahead and attach this to a top folding white card base using some dot liner. I like to add a lot of dot liner. It's a very heavyweight, nice cardstock. And I did leave a bit of a white border. And then for the succulent, I'm using some foam squares to pop it up. And I'll just put it on top of the first succulent that I stamped out. So this is a very simple card. Next, I'm going to stamp out the sentiments. One of them will say, "So proud of you," and the second, "You inspire me." I'm using some Versamark ink to stamp these out on some black cardstock. And then I can pour over some white embossing powder. I always let my heat tool warm up for about 60 seconds before I bring it to the paper, and I can melt these, and they just turn so glossy and bright. It's so pretty. I cut these out using a fishtail die, and now I'm adding some foam strips behind them. I can just cut away the excess and put that back on the foam sheet and reuse it. Okay, so let's put this one up at the top, so proud of you, and then underneath we'll put you inspire me. Pull off the backing, and I'm not going to line these up perfectly. One's going to be a little to the right. Next, I'll add a few gems to this card. And these are the onyx black gems. I'm going to put a bunch around the sentiment. And they're so little, I have to use my all-in-one tool to pick these up. Let's add a really small one at the top and another small one just under the sentiment. And here is a close-up look at the finished card. I didn't decorate the insides of any of these cards today, but I do want to go back and decorate or put something fun inside. On card number 2, I'm going to start off by attaching a piece of pink sand cardstock onto the card base. And again, I'm leaving a white border around the edges. I wanted to put an interesting focal piece to attach my plant to, so I'm using this die set from Spellbinders. It's called Log Cabin and Flower Mini Quilt. I'm adding some dimension with some glitter foam that I cut the die out with as well. I added a piece of wild berry cardstock on top of that, and you'll just be able to see a little sparkle of glitter at the edges of it, which is really pretty. Now I'm going to center this at the top of the card. And this just makes a fun little window for my cactus. I'll put an acrylic block on top of this and just let it dry for a minute. Before I attach the cactus, however, I am going to stamp out the sentiment. This one says, "Sending good vibes your way," and I like how subtle and small it is underneath my die cut piece. Now I can attach the cactus, and I'm just using liquid glue to do this. Just trying to hit the places or add glue to the places where the cactus will be. And then I can adhere this to the bottom left corner of this die cut shape. I'm also going to be using the die that says hugs. And I cut the shadow piece out with white cardstock, and the letters I cut out with more of the wild berry cardstock. I really like it when they include little extras in their die sets like this. This would be an easy sentiment to pop up with foam squares or foam strips. However, for this card, I'm just going to glue it down flat under the sentiment that I stamped out. And I think that just looks so cute at the bottom of the card. So very simple design. And here is a close-up look. You can see it sparkling around the edges of the cardstock because of that glitter foam. It's so much fun. The design for card number 3 is going to be very similar. I'm using a piece of fern cardstock, and this time I'm going to heat emboss my sentiment on this cardstock. And the sentiment is going to say, "Just a note, you're looking sharp." So I'll ink up the stamps with some Versamark ink, or on some white embossing powder, and then I can just quickly melt this small sentiment. This does warp the paper just a little bit, but I'm planning on using lots of dot liner on the back of this. I'm using a tissue to wipe off the anti-static powder. And now I could just attach this to a top folding white card base with lots of dot liner. So the quilting die set came with 2 designs. I'm just using the second design on this card. I cut out a piece of beeswax cardstock and a piece of glitter gold craft foam. And I adhered those together with some liquid glue. I'll put a little bit of glue on the back and dab off the excess, and attach this to the top middle of the card. I'll weight this down again with an acrylic block. So this time I'm just going to put glue all over the back of the cactus and attach that. Last, I'll add a few opal gems to the front of this card. And then let me show you a close-up look. I had so much fun playing with this stamp set. It's such a versatile one, and I loved all of the images and sentiments in it. Again, I'll leave a link to the stamp set and the die set in the description box, as well as the links to the other products in this release. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you were inspired. And I hope you take the time today to sit down and create something beautiful. Take care, my crafty friends. Bye.